It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Benvenuti tutti. Welcome, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. Just getting a little bit of my Italian practice in there. I've got my Italian tutor who lives in Italy, who is lives in the area of Puglia, which is the heel of the Italian boot. She is back from her summer vacation, so we've started to have some more conversations, so I get some practice there. I'm also doing another website called Tandem, where it's all free, but you have to help the other person, which is cool. I'm good with that. So maybe I'll learn some English. But on Tandem, boy, they should be a sponsor, shouldn't they? Tandem, if you're listening, send me money. Same thing, Pimsleur. But with Tandem, you sign up and you put what your native language is and where you live and what languages you know and what languages you want to learn. And the program tries to find matches for you. So for me, it's simple. I'm a native English speaker. One could argue whether I do it well or not. And I want to learn Italian. And so Tandem suggests people that are Italian speakers. Now, I've selected native Italian, and I've also selected that they live in Italy. And the reason for that is I don't want someone who learned Italian as they grew up, but now lives in Germany and has a weird German accent in their Italian. They're probably better at Italian than me, but I want to hear someone who lives and is native to Italy to try to get the best sound that I can. But Tandem hooks me up, and I've talked to one person so far, and I've got two or three that I'm trying to fit in, but again, my schedule is kind of busy. But the idea is that I speak to them in Italian a little bit. They speak back to me in English a little bit, and every once in a while, we give gentle recommendations at how to improve it. Like one of the people I was talking to, and it's very, very common for an Italian speaker when learning English to have a problem with past tense words that I don't even think of as being past tense because I just talk in English because I learned it. I grew up here. But they might say, I would say, I walked to the store. They might say, I walked to the store. Because in Italian, you pronounce every letter. You pronounce every sound. Nothing is silent except for the fucking H. Like hospital, they completely dropped the H. I know this is the case for French too, but it's ospedale. There's no H. Or hotel, you're going to the hotel. It actually is spelled with an H. It's the only thing that's silent in Italian, to my knowledge. So I have to explain to somebody that grew up in Italy, speaks Italian, that walked, at least when I say it, ends with a T. Walked. And they're blown away by that. Where does the T come from? I don't know. It's just how I say it. And maybe people in different parts of the United States pronounce it differently. But that's a new bit of fun that I'm working on. Another update, solar panel update. Last month, my bill would have been about $270, but because of the solar panels, it was about $70. Now, I intentionally put in a system that would not cover 100% of my electricity, in part because at some point I run out of roof space, and in part because as a family, we use a lot of electricity. It's almost embarrassing the amount of electricity I use. Now, a couple of things. One, I work from home. And of course, I have 2 electric cars. And when I do take a break and watch TV, it's a big TV, and I have it hooked up to an amplifier with speakers and all kinds of stuff. So we use a lot of electricity. The amazing thing is when I was doing some checking on my electric bills, the amount of electricity I used last month was within 4% of each of the previous years for that month, for that time period. And 4 years ago, I didn't have one electric car. I added the Chevy Bolt with a B. I'm going to give you an update on that here in a minute. And now we have the RAV4 Prime from Toyota that plugs in and has like a 16, 18 kilowatt hour battery, which is nothing compared to the 60 kilowatt hour battery in the Bolt. Of course, it's a bigger and larger vehicle, so it doesn't get as far per kilowatt hour. But with two electric cars, we're using almost the same electricity as I did 4 years ago before electric cars. I'm still not quite sure how that worked out. I think maybe because we were gone for like 5 days during the month, and maybe in previous years we didn't go anywhere in August because it's freaking hot. That might be it. The other thing that I've changed, and I think I've talked about this, because I pay a different price for electricity every hour, hourly billing from Commonwealth Edison, ComEd here in the Chicagoland area. The prices actually change every 5 minutes. They call it hourly billing, or time of use billing might be more appropriate. But the price changes every 5 minutes. And as you can imagine, on a hot summer day in the afternoon, the prices are the highest. Overnight, between like 1 and 5, the prices are the lowest. I think that's pretty straightforward. It's one of the reasons that 60% of my solar panels are on the west side of my house and only 40% is on the east side of my house, because for several months, at least 3, 4, maybe 5 months, when there's this peak in the afternoon, I want to produce more electricity when the electricity is the most valuable, because at any moment in time, if I'm creating more than I'm using, I get to offset what I'm using. I kind of sort of selling it back to ComEd, but it's not quite that simple and it's confusing. And I'm not sure I even fully understand it after all this research. But the general idea is I can charge my cars overnight at 6 to 8 cents per kilowatt hour. And sometimes I can sell electricity to ComEd in the middle of the afternoon for 15 to 20 cents a kilowatt hour. It's not anywhere near as big of a difference as I thought it would be, but it helps. And so that's part of the reason. But if a normal family moved into our house with no or maybe even only one electric car, the solar panels might provide 100% of what they use. For me, it's not enough. When the company set it up, they predicted it would cover 65% of my usage. I estimated 75% because I think they were sandbagging a little bit. And so far, it looks like my 75% number is going to be pretty close. And I had also calculated, because of the time value of the electricity, that I'm going to cover 90 to 95% of the variable cost of my electricity, which I haven't done the math on that, but I think I'm really close. And I say variable cost because there's certain costs with my electric provider that I must pay no matter what. There's a meter fee, a customer fee, a line charge fee. There's some fixed fees that I will pay no matter how much electricity I make. And the interesting thing is you are not allowed to put in a system. Well, you're not allowed to get a rebate from the electric company on a system that produces more than what you have historically used. And if you do, over a 12-month period, produce more kilowatt hours than you've used, those disappear. So it's like a gift back to the electric company. So I didn't want to pay more to create more electricity just to give it back to them. So I want to get paid for every unit that I use. I think one of the other big factors is I started doing this thing because of the hourly billing, where I overcool the house at night and then we coast through the day without using air conditioning at all, almost all days. And that has been an adventure, and it might be more work than it's worth. But to me, it's kind of like a math game. I don't know, that's maybe just game. Maybe you can relate to it if I say it's just a game. It's a game, and I'm trying to learn the rules as I'm exploring this game and what works and what doesn't work. And so one of my fears was that while I might be using electricity more cheaply overnight, am I using way more energy to overcool the house to then not cool it during the day? So I have now proven to myself, because of these bills, that not only am I not using additional electricity to do this, I might be using less electricity to do this. And I think the key to this, it was the second part of this, is not just overcooling the house at night, but I have a 8-inch inline fan that someone might put into a greenhouse, and then a 15-foot flexible duct that looks like a giant slinky, or the hose on the back of your dryer that goes to vent outside. It's like that, but it's 8 inches and 15 feet long. And I blow air up from the basement. So if you don't have a basement, this is not going to work. If you're always in the sun, this is going to be hard to do. But because I have a basement, I've opened the vents so the air conditioner actually blows cold air at night in the basement. Plus, it's already cool down there because it's the basement. And somewhere around noon, that fan it's on a timer, and it kicks on, and it blows air up the stairs through the tube. So it's much more efficient. It's not just a fan pushing air up a stairway. It's going through an actual vent, and that pours out on the main floor. Now, the upstairs of the house, when it's really hot outside, still gets hot, but we're not up there that much during the day. The kitchen, the living room, my office is half a flight up, but everything is on the main floor, so that cold air pouring up from the basement allows me to not run the air conditioner and keep a pretty reasonable temperature in the house. I also, to keep the basement dry, I run a dehumidifier, so it's blowing up cool and dry air, relatively dry air. And of course, the hottest and most humid days, I run a second air conditioner overnight on the main floor because, you know, if it's 80 degrees in your house and dry air and you have a fan blowing, that actually can work. Now, sometimes it just gets too hot and I'll run the air conditioning for a few minutes. But all but the most extreme days, I can go from like 9 or 10 in the morning till 8, 9 o'clock at night without running the air conditioning at all. In part because, like I said, the walls were cold, the floors were cold, everything was cold from overnight. My fear was I would use more kilowatt hours that way, but it looks like I use less. I actually use less, and the system is not stressed in the middle of the afternoon. So that's kind of cool. Last topic before we get into the show. And by the way, coming up, I'm going to have a brief discussion about future tax increases that may or may not happen. Just some ideas that have been thrown around that may or may not be in the new bill that the Democrats are trying to pass at the federal level, and what Biden might or might not sign. And I also have a short segment on Schwab and new fees that they might be charging retail customers. All the details will be in that segment, of course. But the other update is about my car, my electric car. I don't know how much I've told you about the problems that Chevrolet has been having. Chevy, owned by GM. It's one of their brands. And my car, of course, specifically is the Bolt with the B, Bravo, not the Volt Victory, which is an unfortunate naming coincidence, maybe. But the Bolts have developed a bad flaw, or there's a flaw in the manufacturing process of the batteries. And apparently there's even 2 flaws. And when those 2 flaws occur within the same cell, and again, this gets very technical, and I'm not sure I even understand it fully, so I'm going to try to keep it simplified for my own benefit. Basically, the batteries don't function correctly under certain circumstances, and they can create a short where the electricity is moving through the battery even though it's not being used, and that can create a fire hazard. It's a very small number of packs, but each car has a large number of packs in it, and there's a lot of cars. So far, GM has sold, I think, something like 160,000 of the Bolt, and there's some phenomenally low error rate in the individual packs, but so far has resulted in about 14, 15 of these cars catching on fire spontaneously. Thankfully, no one has been hurt. Thankfully, the fires have only partially damaged a few garages and maybe a small part of a house, but not burned houses to the ground. And one of the reasons for that is that when the fires start, they have limited oxygen. So it's the battery itself burning, and it makes a lot of smoke, sometimes for 10, 15, 20 minutes before it burns enough to escape the containment of the battery and then get exposure to oxygen. And then it, of course, will take off and being fueled additionally by the oxygen. But it'll total your car. I mean, once smoke starts coming out of your battery pack, you're done, right? You're done. And so it's happened. So Chevrolet, GM, has recommended that you don't fully charge the battery, that you don't fully drain the battery. Yes, I'm summarizing here. I can give you specific details if you want. You could always email me. But it makes the car harder to use. They also recommend that you don't charge unsupervised, that you don't charge overnight while you're sleeping, that if you do have to charge in your garage or close to your house, that you then move the car further away. And for some people, that's a fucking deal breaker. If it's the only car you've got and you have a parking garage, or you have to park in your garage, or even if you park right outside of your garage, say you're in a townhouse, you're still next door to your neighbor's garage. Maybe you can't park on the street. It's a really big problem for some people. For me, it's annoying. It's not that big of a deal. I'm in suburban area and I can charge the car early in the morning when rates are still low and then put it on the street. And if it catches on fire, it's going to be a big spectacle, but probably nothing gets hurt other than the car, and maybe the road gets damaged. I don't know. But there's not a big line of cars that I had to wedge into and park next to. It's not that big of a problem for me. And since I work from home, I'm not putting on a ton of miles and needing to charge the car all of the time anyway. The nice news is that after a couple of failed attempts at solving the problem with software, not GM's specialty, they have decided that they're just going to have to replace all of the batteries, 100% of them, because one of the things they wanted to do is replace the individual packs, the little pouches inside the car. But the time and effort involved in taking the entire battery off the car, taking it apart, testing every single pack, and figuring out which one would be the one that needs to be replaced, it seems to be so labor intensive and costly that that's not even a viable option anymore. They just have to replace the entire battery pack. The big question was, when are they going to be able to do that? I think just yesterday or maybe 2 days ago, GM announced that they have now convinced themselves, along with LG, the company that actually makes the batteries with GM, that they now have changed the production process to no longer have the 1 or 2 errors that have occurred within the battery packs, and they will now be able to replace all of the cars. Well, they'll now be able to start production of the batteries that replace the batteries that are already in the cars. So they're talking about having the first batteries available in October, middle of October. So a month from now, I don't know at what rate they can produce these batteries. So if there's 160,000 that need to be replaced and or put into new production units, I don't know. Is that 6 months backlog? Is it 12 months? Is it 2 years? I don't think it's going to be 2 years. But the nice thing is that the new battery packs are actually better than the ones they're replacing. So I get an 8% increase in range. So my range will go from EPA rated 239 to an EPA rated 260, which is nice. And the new battery pack restarts the warranty period on the battery. So my car is a 19, so it's getting pretty close to being 3 years old. And the new battery pack will come with 8 years and an additional 100,000 miles from the date that it's installed of coverage from GM/LG. So I use the battery for 3 years. I get a replacement battery that has a longer range, maybe a little bit faster charging time. And so for me, it's not really that big of a deal. Like I said, I'm lucky, very lucky. So anyway, enough babbling on. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk about Schwab's new trading fees for Vanguard funds and possible tax changes that are coming up maybe sooner rather than later. And listen to the break, and we'll talk to you in a minute.
How you can justify wanting to take something away from people, from 95, that gives meaning to 95% of the American people, and replace it with something that gives meaning to just 5% of the American people?
Well, what an incredibly stupid question. First, I've said repeatedly that this stuff cannot be taken away from people. It is their favorite toy, and it will remain so. As Freud said in The Future of an Illusion, it will remain that way as long as we're afraid of death and have no problem, which is, I think, likely to be quite a long time. Second, I hope I've made it clear that I'm perfectly happy for people to have these toys and to play with them at home and hug them to themselves and so on and share them with other people who come around and play with the toys. So that's absolutely fine. They are not to make me play with these toys. Okay? I will not play with the toys. Don't bring the toys to my house. Don't say my children must play with these toys. Don't say my toys might be a condom. Here we go again. I'm not allowed by their toys. I'm not going to have any of that. Enough with clerical and religious bullying and intimidation. Is that finally clear? Have I got that across? Thank you.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
This Investing Skeptically segment is about Schwab and the fees they charge people to buy Vanguard index funds. This is something I already deal with a little bit at TD Ameritrade, because to buy a Vanguard fund and a few other fund families, if your money is held at TD Ameritrade, there is a fee. A lot of funds, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of funds, are free to buy and sell at TD Ameritrade. Now, it's radio, so I have to tell you, I have my little scare quotes up. It's free to buy these funds and sell these funds. But of course, the fund that you're buying pays the fees to the firm that is doing the transactions, in this case, TD Ameritrade, or what we're going to talk about here in a minute, which was now related to Schwab, because Schwab did buy TD Ameritrade, or at Fidelity, or any other place where you could put your money. When you buy a mutual fund, there are costs associated with that. One of the things that TD Ameritrade does now for me and for my clients is they send updated statements, updated documents from that specific fund. So they have to get those documents, they have to store those documents, they have to mail them, legally required documents, and they have costs. And of course, TD Ameritrade was in business to make money. Schwab is in business to make money. And there are expenses involved with sending you quarterly statements, whether they're by the mail or electronically, to answer your phone calls if you have questions, to set up accounts, to run a great big system where you can log on and easily see what's going on within your account at any time, day or night, with a few exceptions when servers and programs are being updated and those kinds of things. So they do have expenses, and of course, you as the customer always pay those expenses because they have to get the money from somewhere. And decades ago, it started to be that, because it used to be in the olden days, that if you wanted to buy or invest in a mutual fund, you had to find that mutual fund. You had to contact that mutual fund. They would send you marketing materials and an application, and you would take your hand with a little pen and fill out a piece of paper or 5 or 6 pages and send it back, and then they'd say you're approved, and then you would write them a check, and then you would send the check. And the clearinghouses, people like Schwab and TD Ameritrade, made it really easy. And what happened is most of these mutual fund companies said, hey, you know what? It will be cheaper for us to pay TD Ameritrade or Schwab some fee, whatever that was, $10, $20, $50, for every time we get a new client through the clearinghouse, because it's cheaper than us marketing and sending out packets of papers and doing all this stuff in-house. So a lot of that work left them, and they saved a lot of money. So they just paid other people to do part of the job for them. And that works out pretty good for most people. Vanguard, as well as a few other fund families. I know Fidelity has now taken this position to keep costs down. And Dodge & Cox funds, which is a relatively bigger name in the industry, they all now take this position that they will not pay any other company a penny, period. And that includes TD Ameritrade and Schwab. So if you set up an account at Vanguard, you can buy and sell within whatever size limits they have for any individual specific mutual fund or index fund. You can buy and sell following those rules, no fees. But if you have an account at TD Ameritrade, you have to pay to buy and you have to pay to sell. It's a small amount generally speaking, if you have a sizable portfolio. But if you only have $3,000 or $5,000, a $50 hit is kind of a pain. And it's one of the reasons why when someone comes to me and they have something like $3,000 or $5,000, I suggest they just buy the total stock market index, because there are fees associated with having a whole bunch of different funds. Now, the value of having all those different funds becomes more noticeable when you have a larger portfolio. So when you have $1 million, a $25 or a $50 fee to buy or sell a specific mutual fund isn't that big of a deal. All costs matter, but it's one of those things. It's convenient. It's all in one place. You get these great transactions. You have an advisor that can do it. And all those things seem to work out pretty well. And it just popped into my head. One of the things that people ask me all the time is, Phil, why don't you just do this at Vanguard instead of dealing with TD Ameritrade and Schwab? Well, the funny thing is, many years ago, I did. I've been doing this for about 25 years. And when I originally started, I did this all directly at Vanguard. And it went along fine for several years, and I was a nobody. I'm still a nobody, but I was a smaller nobody. And at some point, Vanguard decided that not only did they not want to help advisors, but they wanted to steal all of their advisors' clients. And that's a buzzkill for a relationship. So while they were trying to steal all of my clients and kicking me out the door, I had to find another place to go. And there's only so many places you can go. And you want to go to a place that's, about, that's reliable, that's reasonably affordable. And TD Ameritrade floated to the top of that list. Not that I had many choices, because I was so small then that most places wouldn't even give me the time of day, because just like me now, I'm the asshole where I have a minimum, currently $2 million, that if you don't meet that minimum, I'm kind of full. And it's harder for me to manage smaller accounts because I just am running out of time, as possibly evidenced by the fact that I can't seem to get out a show every week anymore. But so things happen. Anyway, so Vanguard kicked everybody out. And I was left scrambling. And still to this day, Vanguard will not work directly with advisors or allow advisors to bring accounts over to Vanguard, because I think if they did, I might do that. I'd have to really think about it. It's a theoretical at this point because it doesn't happen. But the other thing that's kind of funny is that recently Vanguard has made some decisions that I'm not really in love with. They've launched more managed funds, which I don't like. So they're moving away from the core philosophy of John Bogle, the gentleman who founded the Vanguard Mutual Fund Company and created index funds, the very person who made them, risked everything, bet his career on index funds and won. Yay for him. But they do more managed funds. They do different kinds of managed funds. They also do, environmentally social governance funds, a fund now, which I've talked about here, why those don't work. You can look back through the library to find one of those shows. And recently they launched kind of an index fund plus, where you can get this special fund, and I'm not exactly sure how it works, but you can pick and choose what you do and don't want to own within the fund. Well, if you're picking and choosing what you do and don't want to own, of course, they have to track that and manage that and buy and sell, and it dramatically increases the cost. And the reason you are using an index fund is because you don't know what the fuck to pick. Now, if you know what the fuck to pick, you're not going to use the index fund. So I don't know. It's just another way to bring in money, and that's great. It kind of circles back to this whole idea that corporations often go for making money. And if they see something that they're missing out on and they want to pick that up, it's not necessarily in the investor's best interest, but there might be a lot of people want it and a lot of people want to throw money at it. So they go, okay, fine, this is not what we do, but we'll open it up because a bunch of idiots want to throw money at us. Well, one of the perks historically from Vanguard is they were beyond that. I don't know how beyond that they are now, and how much had to do with John Bogle passing away a couple years ago. I don't know, but it's just the way things are. So anyway, full circle, long way of getting to the news that has come out from Schwab, which I don't know that it affects TD Ameritrade customers today. And there's also a little bit of nuance that I have to go in here, is that Schwab, just like TD Ameritrade and probably other companies, will have different categories of clients. One of the categories they have is retail clients. So if you're just an average person and you go online and you open up an account and you put in a couple $100,000, maybe even a couple of million, and you open your account at TD Ameritrade, or if you open it at Schwab, I happen to know the case for both of these companies, you are considered a retail client. You came in through retail, through normal means, you're just a normal person, and that's cool. Both of these companies, now I don't know if Schwab uses the same word yet, but at TD Ameritrade, if you are coming in and you get accounts set up through an advisor, someone like Phil Ferguson, something like Polaris Financial Planning, that's considered the institutional side. Now, I don't know every category of every person that's collected in the institutional side, but every account that I open up at TD Ameritrade, and I believe every account that I'm going to open up at Schwab, will be in something like institutional, although Schwab may have a different name for it. And then, of course, they might have really big accounts and special perks and privileges if you are a giant company that sets up your 401k or 403b, or if you're the U.S. government or state government, there can be other categories. So for retail, Schwab has announced that the fee to buy a Vanguard fund will no longer be $25 to $50, maybe even it was $50 at Schwab for retail customers. It is now going to be about $75. And that'll get your attention. Even, if you're investing hundreds of thousands, you don't want to be paying $75 all the time if you don't have to. If you're a small investor, what it means is that if you're adding cash, maybe you should spool up a little more cash and then make a purchase once you've built up some more money. It might also mean that you might want to you could keep the funds that you have, but as you add money, buy shares of the ETF version of the Vanguard Index Fund. I really like not using the ETF version because of the 2 to 3 days to get your money out, and it removes the temptation to buy and sell. Now, keeping in mind, depending on where your money is located, there might be a fee. It might be $7, it might be $15, it might be $20 to buy and sell an ETF, depending on where you are. If you're getting a very, very liquid, very highly traded ETF, fine. I'm cool with that. I'm okay with that. Just keep in mind, if you get a very illiquid, very low trading volume ETF, you can cause problems. An ETF does not necessarily trade at what's called the net asset value, which is the value of all of the underlying companies that it owns combined. ETFs trade at market price. They can trade above or below that value. So keep that in mind. If you don't know that, research that before you do anything that might cost you a bunch of money. And of course, with an ETF, you have to pay transaction cost to get in, pay the transaction cost to get out. You might pay above or below net asset value. And you even have the possibility, like trading any stock, that the broker is making a little bit of money on the transaction. It's not a lot per share, but if you're trading a large amount, it can be noticeable. Sometimes this can be described as the spread. It's just a couple of pennies per share, the difference. And the ironic thing is that if you're a very small client, that's great. You're absolutely delighted to pay pennies per share in a transaction cost and expense to buy that investment position. And ironically, if you're investing very large amounts of money, you might be better off just paying the $75 versus paying a fraction of a dollar every time, which could be more. And one of the things about the Schwab thing, and this is, I've read several articles on it, and of course you could Google it and find these articles too, but for Schwab, the new higher fee is only on purchases, not on selling any shares of the funds, which on the surface doesn't make any sense at all. I don't see the motivation to that, except for one thing that comes to mind, and I don't know if this is the case. Maybe it's just easier to only charge when you're buying and to not charge when you're selling. Perhaps, as a general rule, Schwab now wants to make more effort to make sure that you buy the Schwab index funds. And Schwab does have index funds. I'm not sure exactly how many because I don't study it as much as I study Vanguard, and maybe I'll have to. But if the cost to get out is nothing, it might be easier for them to convince retail investors to sell and then buy the Schwab funds that don't have fees to keep adding money because your account is at Schwab. So it's kind of a play almost like what Vanguard did years ago, where they're trying to bring everybody in as a customer so that they don't have to work through anybody else and everyone is their customer directly. I have no actual knowledge that's what their thinking process was, but it makes reasonable sense. But because you only pay to buy and not to sell, it's more expensive if you're adding money, a little bit more expensive. But if you already have a generous portfolio and you're doing a rebalancing, and let's say you have 12 different positions for different reasons, you have all these things to have a very diversified portfolio, and you're doing, I don't know, a 6-month rebalance or a once a year rebalance is perfectly fine for most people. And you see 4 things that are a little too big and a couple things that are a little too small. Let's say you sell some money from 4 things and you put the money into 4 other positions. Well, in the Schwab retail situation, instead of $50 to sell and to buy, you have nothing to sell and $75 to buy. So by elimination of the fee when you sell something, as a Schwab retail client, to do a rebalancing, your cost actually just went down. It's kind of trippy. So fees are, you got to look at all the different angles for it. So for a rebalancing position, or if you're generally taking money out and you're in retirement, your fees went down. So a lot of people, this is actually going to reduce the fees. But the person that it hurts is someone with a very small portfolio that can add $100 or $200 a month. If you add $100 and want to buy more shares of an index fund from Vanguard, you're not going to want to pay $75 to add $100. I mean, that's just crazy. So in that case, again, take a harder look at ETFs. So that's a little bit about Schwab, and we'll take a little break and get on with the next little bit. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investments should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship.
Hey you, it's me, Sarah Silverman. Lately I've noticed a lot of really sad, really long commercials on TV with grossly sick, emaciated people from all over the world. And it turns out they look that way because they don't have food. And I know what you're thinking. If you don't like it, Silverman, TiVo passed it. I did. You still see them. Especially because, I have a 48-inch plasma high-def TV. So every devastating image is in, brilliant, crisp, vivid, like they're in my apartment, So how do I get these people out of my apartment, basically? And I think I figured it out. All I have to do is end world hunger. And then I'm like, okay, how are you gonna end world hunger? And then it hit me. Sell the Vatican, feed the world. Think about it, we need a hero, and who is more primed to be our hero than the Pope? He's literally a caped crusader. What is the Vatican worth, $500 billion? This is great. Sell the Vatican, take a big chunk of that money, build a gorgeous condominium for you and all of your friends to live in, all the amenities, swimming pool, tennis court, water slide. And with the money left over, feed the whole fucking world. You preach to live humbly, and I totally agree. So now maybe it's time for you to move out of your house that is a city. On an ego level alone, you will be the biggest hero in the history of ever. And by the way, any involvement in the Holocaust, bygones. I know some of you out there are like, well, why don't those bums get a job like the rest of us? Well, did you know that the average Arby's employee in Ethiopia only gets paid nothing an hour because they don't have one. They don't have one. The bottom line is this. If you sell the Vatican and you take that money and you use it to feed every single human being on the planet, you will get crazy pussy. All the pussy. And I don't mean literally. That might not be your cup of tea. I don't know what your version of all the pussy is. But you'll get all the pussy. Amen.
Well, it's time to talk about taxes. There are several proposals in the new Democratic bill that does a lot for infrastructure, including helping to fund electric cars and electric car charging stations and a lot of other things, some of which I've talked about those perks in other segments. But today I'm going to talk about how it's supposed to be paid for. And this is one of those weird political bullshittery kind of things where Republicans want Democrats to pay for everything that they propose, but then when they're in charge, they just spend on whatever they want and ignore the spending kind of thing. So, what is it? The only thing better than tax and spend is worse than tax and spend is no tax and spend, which is ironic because Republicans apparently own the talking point about financial responsibility. Well, if you want to talk about financial responsibility, you actually pay your bills. So here are some of the things that are discussed, and recently Biden came out. I'm just going to grab a few of his quotes here. Let me see if I got one here. Where was this? The data is absolutely clear. Over the past 40 years, the wealthy have gotten wealthier, and too many corporations have lost a sense of responsibility to their workers, their communities, and the country. That seems really true. Now, even in an earlier segment, I had mentioned that companies' jobs are to make money. That's what they do. They, when left unchecked, they're going to make more money, and they're going to pay as little as possible, or as little as they think they need to pay. And so there does need to be some kind of regulation. Otherwise, they'll just get carried away. Another quote here. How is it possible that the wealthiest billionaires in the country can entirely escape paying income tax on what they've made? Also, another quote from Biden. How is it possible for millionaires and billionaires that can pay a lower tax? Wow. Let me try that again. How is it possible for millionaires and billionaires that can pay a lower tax rate than the teachers, firefighters, or law enforcement officers? Okay, so that wasn't a reading problem. It was a different way of saying it than I would say it, I guess. I'll be polite that way. And that's one of the problems that even Warren Buffett has talked about, that his tax rate is dramatically lower than a secretary that he might hire to do work for him. And that's a known thing, and there's a reason it's that way. Because the wealthy people pay and contribute and push for little perks, push for rules. So if you have no job and a multi-million-dollar portfolio, and you bring in maybe $500,000 a year from that portfolio by selling stuff, stocks that had appreciated, you're going to pay capital gains tax. And because of the number I picked, the maximum tax you're going to pay is 15%. And you're also not going to pay Social Security tax on that. I pay Social Security tax twice because I'm the employee and the employer. Most people would pay it once. But if you're not having earned income, you're not paying Social Security tax. I don't know if they'll pay Medicare tax on that money. I don't think so. Oh, no, they won't. Not on that amount. So you could make almost $500,000 a year or sell $500,000 a year. And I think one could live okay on an income of $500,000 a year. And you could take that money out and you're going to pay 15% tax on it. Another trick, just as a side point for the really wealthy, when interest rates are painfully low, like they are now, 3% or 4% for loans, why sell anything? Why not just get a big fat loan? So you might even be able to write off the interest on the loan and you don't have to pay taxes on what you own because you didn't sell anything, you got a loan. So their tax rates, the really, really wealthy, is very low. And they have experts to help them. They pay a lot of money to avoid taxes. They make contributions to government officials to pay taxes. And over time, little laws that tweak this thing and tweak that thing. And none of them really matter too much to the average person. But cumulatively over decades, it results in wealthy people paying a lot less. And that's what Biden is getting at. He also has this statement here. Today in this country, right now, the top 1%, for example, evade an estimated $160 billion in taxes that they owe each year. Not new taxes they owe, end quote. So he also had a quote, and I couldn't find the exact words here, but it was something like, he's not against millionaires and billionaires, and maybe you are, and maybe I am, even, well, at least for billionaires, that's just crazy. What are you doing with all that money? When people are hungry, that's just wrong. Anyway, Biden took the position that he's not against millionaires and billionaires, but you shouldn't pay less taxes than the average working person. And so it's not about penalizing rich people. It's about leveling the playing board. And these people should pay taxes. Now, I would probably, I don't think probably. I will go a step further, that there should be some kind of wealth tax, because a lot of people that are really, really wealthy aren't earning money, and a lot of these rule changes still won't affect them because of how they make money. A very fuzzy. In the investment world, sometimes people have talked to me know that it's one of the few places in my life where being pedantic is actually kind of helpful, because someone will say, I made this much money. What do you mean by made? Did you have stock gains? Did you have bond dividends? Did you have earned income? Did you have an appreciated asset? Did you sell real estate? What do you mean by made? I made money. Is it adjusted gross income? Is it modified adjusted gross income? So all these things are very specific, and different things that you made might get taxed at different rates depending on the year, the effect of other sources of income. So when someone says, I made this much, I'm like, well, what does that mean you made that? Oh, that's your gross wages for the year. So it's your gross wages before any and all taxes, deductions, and health insurance and all that stuff. That might be your gross income. Then you have net, modified, adjusted net income. Oh, it gets crazy. Okay, I diverge. The point is that people who are making a lot of money should be paying taxes. Now, I would argue for a progressive tax that they should be paying more taxes, not only just more in dollars, but at a higher rate. And in some cases they do, but there's a lot of people who find ways around it. And I think that a progressive tax is what should be in place. If you are able to make millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or billions of dollars, you should kick back in to the system that existed that helped you do that. Often I hear people say, well, they made their own money. Sure, they did. They did. But they got money from their parents. Okay, maybe they didn't. They got money from relatives. Okay, maybe they didn't get that. They got a loan from the Small Business Administration. Maybe they didn't get that. If they did it all on their own with their own money, they still didn't have to build the roads to their warehouse or their factory. Maybe the last 100 feet of a development or something, but there's roads already there. So when supplies need to come in, they have a way. When they need to leave, they have a way. There's a stable system of our society and our culture that's regulated by taxing officials, by police officials, by fire departments, Fire department comes when your warehouse catches on fire. Sure, you're paying for that through your property taxes, but you're not hiring your own fire company. You're not bringing in your own water. There's a system that you're taking advantage of. Electricity runs to your building, and there's electrical right-of-ways across the streets and through the countryside that allow power to come to you at a reasonable cost. You don't have to pay every piece of property that you go over and negotiate individually how much you're going to have to pay for running a power line over somebody's house or behind somebody's house. So there's a lot of things built into the system. Even funded universities and colleges that provide education to the employees that you need to hire and the experts that you need to have. That you didn't pay to train them. You didn't pay to raise them. You're not paying all those costs. So you're benefiting from a lot of things that we like that make a relatively stable modern society for most people. But there are people being left behind. And maybe they're at some disadvantage that you don't understand. Maybe, I don't know, they just can't seem to get out of the rut that they're in, because how do you study to get a college degree if you have 2 kids, or even if you don't have kids, you have to be able to buy food. You can't just take 4 or 5 or 6 hours a day to go study. Now, maybe because some people can do that. I don't know. It's not always that easy. Anyway, I'm getting off. So some of the things that have been proposed, and one of the questions, of course, is when do they take effect? And there's even some dispute on that. But a couple things that have been proposed is an increase in the capital gains tax rate. So it right now has a top number of 20%, which only affects people with really high incomes, like $550,000, $600,000, that kind of thing. There's also a supplemental 3.8% tax that might kick in. It's technically not a capital gains tax. It's another kind of tax that helps fund Medicare, but it exists. So if you create a lot of capital gains and you have good income, you might pay 23.8. Where they're thinking of raising that by at least 5%. So the 20 would go to 25. If the 3.8 rule didn't change, it'd be 28.8%. So that's a lot higher. I don't think they're going to lower the dollar tiers of where you get into these, but maybe increase the top tier and maybe increase tiers along the way. And this still might not be in the final bill, but I do expect at some point, overall tax loads on you, the average listener, probably have to go up. The one group that might not go up is people that maybe only make $20,000 or $30,000 a year. They're probably not doing a whole lot of investing. So it may not really be that big of a difference. But if you have invested for a long time in taxable accounts and now you want to start taking money out of a taxable account, whenever you sell something, you can create long-term capital gains. And if you had a choice, you'd want to pay 0%, but 15% is not so bad. 20% is not as good. 25, 28%, if your state taxes you also, it can start to get very expensive. And this is one of those things that for the people who have heard the idea and over the past years taken the advantage when they can to create some capital gains to pay taxes in the current year in hopes of creating what's called a step up in cost basis, where now you only have to pay the higher future tax rates on the future gains. You could have saved, and if you did this, you did save, at least theoretically, a lot of money. So one of the things that might happen, in short, is capital gains tax rates might go up. That can affect some of my listeners. One thing that's not going to affect many listeners is probably an increase in the top marginal tax bracket. That's going to go from, it's proposed that it might go from 37% back to 39.6%. But I think to get to that, you're going to have to make $600,000 or $700,000 in a year. So that won't affect many of my listeners. There will be people who will pay an extra 2%, 2.25%, 2.6%, I guess. I don't really see a problem with that. That's me. You might have a different opinion. That's okay, but something to know. And so, another one that might change, and there's a couple of different proposals, I think, so I'm not sure how this is going to happen, but inheritance tax and gifting. How much money can you give away per year? And is that affected by your income? how much money can you leave to your descendants without having an inheritance tax? I think I saw something where that might fall from 11.7 million to 5 or 6 million. And again, the exact details don't matter at this point because these are just proposals. They might tweak this or tweak that. So don't focus on the details. I think the gist is what you need to catch here is that taxes are probably going to go up. If you hate higher taxes, well, then be mad at Biden and the Democrats. If you hate national debt, be mad at the Republicans that over the last few times they've had control, all they've done is cut taxes without cutting any programs. Because who wants to cut programs? Well, I'm sure you can find something Republicans cut. You could probably find something Democrats cut. But the general gist for both parties is to spend more money. And the Republicans particularly like to reduce taxes. And when you reduce taxes, often the people who pay the most taxes get the most benefit. And now you end up with a situation where you're spending more every year than you're bringing in. So at some point, that could become problematic. There are arguments that a government spending too much, at least the United States government spending more than it brings in, isn't a problem at all. And I've even had on authors of books to come talk about that. And one of the kind of cheeky lines is, it doesn't matter until it does. The question is, when does it? We don't know. Are we there yet? I don't know. So just something to think about when thinking about your investments. What are the taxes you're going to pay? What are the taxes you can avoid? And it's one of those things, while I may not like certain things that help people with high income or large portfolios, I'm kind of ethically obligated to utilize those when possible for the clients that I have. That's the whole fiduciary thing. Why is that word so hard to say? But anyway, so we have that. That's a little segment on possible tax changes.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you have enjoyed the show as much as I have enjoyed making it. If you have show topic ideas or an interview idea, you can, of course, email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. I do know that I forgot one little piece in the Schwab segment, so I want to make sure that I get this in here. I went through that whole process of retail versus institutional for a reason, and then I failed to mention the reason. At this point in time, Schwab has said that the change in the fee structure for buying Vanguard funds applies only to retail customers, not to institutional customers. So at this point in time, if you are using an advisor through Schwab, or for some reason you have an institutional account, the change in fees does not affect you. So that's nice. My understanding is it does not affect anyone at TD Ameritrade at all yet. And it definitely doesn't affect anyone that is using an advisor at TD Ameritrade yet. But they're always subject to change. And I had several different listeners and or clients ask me about this. So it was great that I have this opportunity to describe it. And one person said, so are we just kind of forced to eat this, or is there a way around it? At this point, you're just kind of forced to eat it. And back from the segment, TD Ameritrade and Schwab, they do provide services, and they are out money for providing those services. So they do need to make money somehow, some way. I think Schwab used to have what's called a 15 basis point fee for advisor-client accounts. So 100 basis points is considered 1%. But they were charging a 0.15%. 0.15% historically out of your account for having an institutional account with an advisor. And I think that is, I'm pretty sure that's zero. If I'm wrong, I will come back here and correct myself. You know that I do that when necessary. The next show, I know one piece I'm going to have in it that you're going to love. And I think by default, it's going to be a super shitty fund. But it's something called the American Conservative Fund, and it is an anti-woke fund. And so if they've targeted the suckers. I mean, it's if you think America is going the wrong way and all these crying liberals and sheep and snowflakes or whatever you want to call these people who are woke, and you fucking hate them, and you want to dramatically underperform in your investment, I have the fucking fun for you, and we're going to talk about that next show. I know you're going to enjoy it because I fucking laughed out loud researching this. It's hysterical. But anyway, I'm going to wrap up the show here. Thank you for listening. Of course, if you like the show, you can go to patreon.com/Phil and become a patron as little as $1. The top tier is $6.66 per episode. You could, of course, contribute even more than that, but you don't really need to. It's just a sign to say, hey, Phil, I like the content you're putting out. Keep making more shows. You can go to Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Yeah, Stitcher, and you can leave 5-star reviews. You can also share the show with your friends. And you could also help me out a little bit personally by giving me some show topic ideas. I have been very busy, and it's nice. It's good to have work, but been kind of busy, so the show sometimes gets pushed back a little bit. So if you have great show topic ideas, whether it's you want me to explain what a bond is or a stock, or go over again why bonds might go down if interest rates go up. If you want something really simple, you want me to review the Polaris plan from beginning to end like I did now over a year ago, I'd be happy to do that. Just let me know. But otherwise, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you being here, and hopefully someday post-COVID, not only will I be able to go to Italy for a vacation, but I'll be able to see you at some conference or convention and either shake hands or give a hug. Even with masks on, that's fine, but it'd be nice to see everybody again. Until that happens, ciao.